Winter Roses, Autumn by Fairytalelovr, Chapter 4. Ned helped John to stand up, though he wasn't very firm.
How does it feel?
He asked. Like I've been trampled by a very big and very fat horse, John replied dryly, breathing heavily.
Well, I suppose you will need to do some recovering, even with the whole magical thing,
Ned said. Do you need someone to take you to bed? Benjamin asked, coming into the room with Rob and Adam once Danny had opened the door.
No!
John exclaimed, horrified. My legs are just fine!
It's all right, brother. I'll make sure you don't fall on your ear.
John huffed, but ended up accepting Rob's support, as his legs were really wobbly, and Ghost caught up on the other side. Adam and Leeds went ahead of them, as Wex and 2 others held rearguard. Once they came up to the room John and Danny were sharing, Oris was already there with 3 others.
Aren't you going a little overboard?
John asked as Rob helped him get onto the bed.
Certainly not, Adam replied. You better get used with guards breathing down your neck from now on, because you are not going anywhere alone anymore.
Adam, this is... I agree with him, John, Danny said. We are all going to have guards from now on, even the children. I am not going through what I went through these past 2 days again. John acquiesced. For him it had been like going to sleep and waking up, though the pain of the sword piercing his heart was going to haunt him for a while.
How are you really feeling?
The knight asked.
I'll be fine, John snarled a bit.
Now, I do have a thought. What happened to Thorn? He was tried, confessed his guilt, and was executed, Danny said, clenching her jaw.
John pursed his lips. I wanted to do it myself. Wipe the little smirk off his face. He was smirking.
Adam asked, his face dangerously low. He isn't anymore, John said dryly.
What about the others? Those are waiting for your judgment, Rob said. Good. Adam, make sure they know they swing in the morning. It will be my pleasure.
That's enough for now, Danny cut in. I haven't had enough time with my lord husband ever since he left our home moons ago. I would tell him of how our children fare now. Adam and Rob nodded and left the room. John furrowed his face and groaned in pain, looking for a better position. Are you in pain?
Uncomfortable, rather, he shivered. I can still feel the sword coming in, Danny, he whispered. It's still... If I close my eyes, I can see his smirking face as he pushes the sword in my chest.
She bit her lip but failed to hold in a tear.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, I get it, she said. And she did. John was always someone who kept his emotions hidden, his fears and weaknesses under wraps. Except from her. Growing up as outsiders in Winterfell, they always had to rely on each other, and she loved that she could see into him, that he would allow her into his insecurities. Was it too painful?
It felt like... It hurt like hells. But then... It felt like my blood was boiling and freezing all at once. I felt Ghost's presence. And then it was like I could feel... I don't remember. I'm probably mixing up things.
Mixing what up? Danny asked.
Beyond the wall. Before the wildlings knew they could trust us, they attacked us. They didn't harm us,
John said hastily, seeing her face.
They only wanted to see if we were a threat. But I was knocked unconscious, and I dreamt with my mother. She called me son and was singing a northern lullaby. I thought, I don't know if I'm recalling that or if she came into my dreams again.
I dreamed with your aunt, Danny said with a small smile.
My aunt?
Lyanna Stark. She was all dressed up like a knight. She went up on Winter and said she was going to battle for you. Keep you safe until Melisandre could do the spell. Maybe your mother was keeping company while Lyanna kept guard. Everything for the pack, always.
Jon smiled. I wish I could have met her. Father says Arya is just like her, so I'm sure she was great. And Adam lets slip some things too. Oh, in one of his arguments on the whole idiocy of our trip beyond the wall.
Well, it was idiotic, Dany cut in. You have to have thought there were better ways to achieve your goal than what...
I know. We were impulsive. But here's the interesting part.
What? Adam said something about the rebellion?
In the middle of scolding me, he told me how he was the one who had to tell Aunt Lyanna about the Battle of the Trident. That he had never seen a woman who was so strong crumble like that. And how he wouldn't be able to watch the same thing happen to you. Dany pursed her lips for a moment.
Maybe that was why he was the one who came to get me. He said he wouldn't tell me what happened, only that he would bring me to you.
What he said, for me, it's the final proof that the rebellion was a lie, Dany. Adam is the last man who would follow an order to be a jailer to a kidnapped and raped woman. He would take the order as an insult to his honour, and therefore it would free him from his oath. But he stayed with my aunt, even when your brother was gone to the Trident. He wouldn't hide how much he loved your brother. He said so. He said he loved Rhaegar like a brother, and he all but said she loved him and was devastated to hear of his death.
Your father, Uncle Benjen, Adam, and everyone in Winterfell always compare Lady Lyanna to Arya. From what I know of her, it's hard to believe that she would love Robert Baratheon, or accept what Cersei has to endure, Dany said.
She wanted to believe that more than anything.
And she did, actually.
She had long stopped blaming Rhaegar for the ruin of their family, ever since Lord Stark had assured her that his sister hadn't been taken. Since she understood just what that feeling inside her heart for the man she grew to marry was. If she really was anything like Arya, she would kick him where it hurts rather than let him shame her, Jon said with a chuckle. But enough about her. You were talking about giving our Lyanna a dragon's egg?
Dany smiled and happily cuddled into his arms as she began to speak about their children and their gifts. Sam walked in the room after Gilly allowed his entrance, and found her sitting in an old chair by the window, rocking her son. "Hello. I just wanted to tell you that Jon is awake." "Oh, good," she said. "Is he well?" He is. He recognized all of us and remembers what happened. But you said you wanted to ask me something before this all happened?" Gilly blushed and stood up, placing the baby in a basket. I know you have your duties, and I owe you my life and my son's. But the free folk, they don't like us. They think Craster was an abomination, and they hate him for what he did with his daughters and sons. I'm afraid of what they'll do. These 5 here are quiet, but once there are more of them, what if... "I will talk with Jon and Dany," Sam said. "If they no longer have need of me, I can ask to return south first. But even if we can't, Gilly, you know I will not let them do anything, don't you?" "I know, but I'm afraid anyway." Sam nodded. He had lived afraid of his father long enough. He knew it took a while to really understand that there was no need to be afraid anymore. And the fear was never really gone. Even after Lord Stark had given him the papers, saying he was no longer heir to Hornhill. After Jon had named him his secretary. After he had been given his own title and castles. He still had nightmares with the night of his 8th and 10th name day. when Ratatali had threatened to take the life of his firstborn. "I will talk to John tomorrow morning, I promise," Sam said. Adam knocked on Ned's door just before supper. He had asked Jory to inform him when the Lord Hand would receive him. After 2 nights and a day of vigil, it was no surprise that the man had slept the morning and afternoon away.
"Letter from my sister," Adam said, passing the parchment over.
"Big brother, I write to ensure everyone is well. The dire wolves are restless, which worries me. Earlier they howled in what seemed welcome, but just now the whole island could hear the grief in their howling. The volcano started to release some lava again, and taking into consideration what was happening last time something similar occurred, and Isla's mother senses, I am very worried. Please send me a message as soon as possible. Other than that, all is fine. Cragen is enjoying the company of his cousin and nephew, and the boys are having several nursery adventures, and Lyanna takes very much after her namesake. Love, Lady Ella of House Stark, Lady of Winterfell."
"The wolves communicated across all the north?"
Ned asked with a frown.
"Dire wolves are your business, Stark," Adam said, "but apparently, yes they did. And Ella is not stupid. She knows it's about John. The volcano erupted and Isla had a bad feeling. What do I tell her? They're going to be anxious if they read it in a message." "Tell her something did happen, but that John is fine now. Better to explain in person, when both she and Isla are seeing him alive and well in front of them. And tell her we should be done here soon. I intend to leave as soon as we have a deal with Mance Rayder, and I would like to meet her in Winterfell with the children."
The knight nodded.
"And when are you telling John the truth?" he asked.
Ned hesitated.
"I'm not sure this is the right moment." "What? He died, Adam. He needs to understand there's more at stake now," the Dornishman exclaimed. "He knows the others are coming. Now he needs to understand his role in it. If the focus is the war in the north, say the truth, Stark. You're afraid. You're afraid of how he'll look at you once he knows the truth." "That is not the point," Ned said, though he couldn't deny it was part of the truth. "The point is that it's too dangerous. John is not a 5-year-old boy anymore," Adam exclaimed. "I don't judge you for keeping it from him then, because it was a secret too big for a child to handle. But he is a grown man, married with 2 children and lord of his own castle. He can't be kept from the truth forever. Lyanna would. Don't put this on your sister. She would be the first to say, but she wasn't." Ned finally lost control on his tone of voice. "Daenerys dreamed with her, and she sent me a message making it clear she recognized my role in Jon's life, and still she didn't say anything. All she needed to do was say one little sentence to Daenerys, and the secret would be out. You know about Targaryens and dragon dreams. You know it truly was a vision. But Lyanna kept quiet. And that, to me, is proof she understands this is not the moment."
Adam was too furious to continue the argument, especially because he could see that Ned wouldn't be dissuaded.
"Say what you will, Lord Stark, but the truth will come out eventually. And if you're not the one to tell him, that is why John won't forgive you." "I'm not saying I won't tell him." "No, you're just putting it off. Again." He held an open flame in his bare hand and barely got a blister. The witch brought him back to life with ice and fire. "You heard Benjen. They have more dragon eggs. What are you going to do if John bonds with one of them? If you tell him because you were forced to, he will think you never intended to say the truth, and he will hate you for it. Make no mistake."
Like that, the knight left the room, slamming the door behind himself. Ned punched a vase on the table, turning to open the window, and willing the cold air from outside to cool his anger. Tyrion watched as the children left his chambers. The volcano had stopped oozing lava at daybreak, or so the children claimed, as the Lord had enjoyed the luxury of the four-poster bed in his guest chambers. And not long after, the little Lady Lyanna was seen sneaking out of her nursery, a common enough occurrence, especially in her parents' absence, and the direwolf Nymeria had helped her down the stairs and into the godswood. The dwarf was rejoicing in the pitiful web of spies his sister had attempted to build in the Blessed Island. She had obviously gotten the idea from Varys's little birds, but the spider made sure to put in the effort to teach his children to read and pass on messages. Cersei had hired a dunce to manage the information relayed by the children, a big wall of muscle who could barely string two words together. After Tyrion had really set his mind in rooting out spies and found the children, Bronn had put the thug in one movement, leaving the exiled lion as the children's master. Tyrion was having a lot of fun. First, because he was faking reports to Casterly Rock. It was a threat to mimic the dunce's language, but so far it seemed to be working. Not that Cersei was a master in that area. Second, because his sweet, stupid sister sometimes sent enough information through the questions she made that it allowed him to conjecture. Third, because he was screwing Cersei over, and all the way that she had all but exiled him from Casterly Rock, castle to which he was the rightful heir since Jaime had given it up. This gave Tyrion immense pleasure. "Will you ever explain to me why we're just still here?" Bronn asked. "Well, a very simple reason," Tyrion said, refilling his goblet. "I have nowhere else to go. Certainly nowhere with such accommodations. Plus, the wine is superb and the food is too exotic to be found anywhere else on this side of the narrow sea. Also, Lady Starling is paying me quite handsomely for my expertise in infrastructure." "Well, I am not being paid handsomely," the sellsword complained. "Yes, you are. You've got enough dragons every moon, and the brothels send me high bills. And you also have a room and hot food and a chance to pummel idiots out the harbour. I dare say you're in a very comfortable situation." Bronn shrugged. "Well, beats sleeping in the woods. At least for now." Tyrion chuckled, but didn't give his complaints much thought. Taking over Cersei's scheme had been one good step in the direction of revenge. But he needed more. He needed to get his own spies inside Casterly Rock, and also in the Red Keep. Though the latter might be more complicated. But he needed to have something to fire back at Cersei. Dany took the tray of food back to the table, watching as Jon only burrowed deeper into the bed. It seemed the whole ordeal had taken a lot out of him, because it was barely after sunset and he was already fast asleep. "Come," she said in a low voice at the knock on the door. "Hello." Adam came in. "Just wanted to check on how he is." "He seems only tired," she replied. "We spent the whole day talking, and he is just the same, Adam. Perhaps a bit more subdued." "Coming back or not, I'm sure dying has to have an effect on you. My lady, if I—" "Adam!" she called out with a raised eyebrow, making him chuckle. "We've talked about this. You are family." "Right. Sorry. Dany, I wonder if I—" "Yes, you may ask what you're afraid of asking." "You are just like your brother," Adam said, snorting. "You two would have gotten along terrifically." Dany smiled, then bit her lip, turning to watch her sleeping husband. "I wish I could have met him. But then, how terrible is it of me to not completely regret the rebellion?" she asked, and it was his turn to frown. "I love my life, Adam. I love my husband and my children, and even imagining a life without them hurts. Even if the alternative is a loving mother and brothers and a whole family to call mine. If things were different, I wouldn't even have met Jon." "I have lived through and seen enough that there is one thing I know for certain, is that some things are just meant to be. You and Jon were always meant to be. Besides, Rhaegar was forced into an arranged marriage, one that began to turn sour moons
perhaps even years before Harrenhal. And after that day, he wouldn't have forced anyone into an unwanted betrothal.
You mean after he met the Lady Lyanna?
Adam stopped and clenched his jaw, his anger at Ned Stark and their recent argument coming back. I heard you had an interesting dream,
he said. I did. Dany understood his question with a smile. And she asked me to tell you to stop being so hard on yourself. You have failed no one.
Adam snorted, smiling weakly. He missed Lyanna. He missed her spirit and the simple way she saw the world. She would have revolutionized King's Landing, making court hate her and hate they couldn't be like her. She wouldn't have stood for backstabbing. He could almost picture it now, the fight she would have with Varys about his methods. Lyanna might have been the ice to Rhaegar's fire in some old dusty prophecy, but Adam knew she was the sunlight to chase away the melancholic darkness of the prince's cold compliance. She was one of the kindest people I ever met, the knight said quietly. She was so pure. She was true to herself, and she was fierce about protecting her family. You know how the Starks are, protecting their pack above all else. When she heard about the trident, I thought she'd figure out a way to magically appear there and finish the job Rhaegar started on Robert Baratheon.
You mean Robert was injured? But I thought...
Oh, of course the usurper would camouflage it, but yes, he was badly injured, according to what I heard. That's why Ned Stark was the one to lead the forces south to King's Landing to secure the capital. Robert followed after a week, and he had to ride in a carriage.
So, the rebellion was a lie? Dany asked.
The rebellion was a delusion, Dany, Adam replied. A delusion dressed as salvation and masqueraded as victory. And Westeros is still suffering because of it.
Littlefinger looked out his window, seeing the city go about its business, but gazing at the Sept of Baelor in the far distance. His cat was still inside, out of his reach like she always had been. He remembered arriving at Riverrun as a silly boy with nothing to his name. Lord Tully had been kind and hospitable to the son of his wartime friend, and little Peter had wanted for nothing, being given good chambers and good meals, the company of the Lord's children. Edmure had been much too young to join them, and Lysa had been inconveniently in the way even then. But Cat... Oh, Catelyn Tully, the perfect lady even as a young girl. By the time Peter began fostering with the Tullys, their mother's death had happened long enough before that the eldest daughter had taken over the keep, ruling it with grace and care of a true lady. It wasn't hard for Peter to fall in love with this wondrous girl, a lady from birth, poised and elegant. But not long after, his heart was broken. Lord Tully organised his daughter, his firstborn's betrothal, not to a little lordling from the Vale with nothing to his name, other than a decrepit castle, but the heir to the north. Catelyn, ever the gracious lady, had thanked her Lord Father for this gift, for working so hard to make her the future ruler of such an important household, of a great house. To imagine the Lady of Winterfell! But once supper was over and they retired to the children's chambers, Catelyn let her fears show. She had been scared, of course she had, of going north and rule over those barbarian tree worshippers. She had been afraid of the prospect of her betrothed, a man she knew nothing about but his name. Brandon Stark. How Peter had cursed his name. Catelyn had worried Brandon would be cruel, that he would force her to forsake her gods, the true gods, to worship those trees of his. Her sceptre had soothed her, told her to pray to the Seven forevermore, to beg their guidance and guarding for the trial that awaited her. After all, the gods wouldn't forsake such a pious daughter. Looking back now, still glaring at the splendorous building on top of the Senya's hill, Littlefinger wondered if that had been for the worst. If the scepter's strong presence, caused by the lack of a lady to care for the children, hadn't risen in Catelyn the feeling of too much dependency on the faith. But that was unimportant, because, once letters began to be exchanged, little Lady Catelyn had fallen deeply in love with her uncouth betrothed. There was always a smile, an appreciative comment, truly a fawning. No longer did Catelyn worry about the dreary north, about the cold grey castle in the middle of the grey nowhere, far from anywhere colourfully important. Because Brandon Stark had been charming in his letters, had seduced Catelyn with honeyed words, and made her believe he was the best man that ever lived, and that he truly loved her deeply. She fell for his lies, forgetting who truly loved her in favour of someone she had never met. The betrayal had hurt. Of course it had. But Peter could understand it. Catelyn was a proper lady. She needed to follow her Lord Father's commands. Why would she fight it and be miserable when she could allow herself to find solace in the idea of her betrothed's kindness? It had been close to the wedding, once the Starks arrived in Winterfell for the occasion, rather that Peter had gathered the courage to fight for his beloved, to save her from the unhappiness that awaited her in the lands of summer snows. He had challenged Brandon Stark for Catelyn's love, and the Northerner had laughed. Barbarian that he was, he promised his crying betrothed that he would not harm her defender, but still had nearly gutted Peter. And the boy had failed to free his love from her torment. Catelyn was still doomed to go north, and Lysa, stupid, foolish Lysa, had nearly ruined everything. After the beautiful night Peter had shared with Catelyn, still heavily under the effects of milk of the poppy, the little sister stole into his bed and took advantage of his confusion. Peter had only noticed it was her and not his beloved in the morning, and by then the damage had been done. Catelyn was already lost, and now Peter was stuck with a lovesick Lysa. But he had been lucky in only one little detail. Due to lost letters, the Lord of Winterfell had never been notified his daughter hadn't arrived in Riverrun as he had imagined. Rickard Stark was certain his Lyanna had made a safe voyage from Winterfell, to be company of her soon-to-be good sister for 3 moons before the wedding. But the wild she-wolf had disappeared on the way. Later they had discovered she had been abducted by the Dragon Prince. But then, oh, Peter still remembered perfectly the confusion that had erupted once the Stark host arrived in the castle. Accusations and yelling, the dumb Northerners searching for their lost pup. Hoster Tully, never one to miss an opportunity, had promised to give his men for the search efforts, but only after the wedding took place. Cursing the River Lord's ambition and despair to marry off his daughter, who was getting past the age for marriage after all, Rickard Stark accepted, and Peter thought all was lost after all. The day of the ceremony dawned like a nightmare for the boy from the Vale. Until, sneaking around as he liked, he discovered the raven from the she-wolf. That blessed raven! He forged a slightly different message, and then used Lysa's blind devotion to his ends. For the first time, telling her to bait Brandon Stark into going after his sister. He knew how much Lysa hated Catelyn, how she envied her big sister, so it was easy to enlist her help. And Brandon Stark, hot-headed fool that he was, saddled his horse and left for the capital faster than word could get to his father, who cursed and sent search parties, but by then the man was gone. Obviously, Peter hadn't even imagined how that little lie would develop. He couldn't have counted on Brandon's stupidity in storming into the Red Keep as he did, nor how the Mad King would react. Brandon Stark kick-started the rebellion, all based on a little lie concocted by a boy from the Vale with nothing to his name. After that, forging a letter from him to Robert Baratheon had been easy. Lysa nearly ruined everything. Tough when she announced to her father that she carried Peter's child and demanded to marry him. But Hostertalio would never waste his daughter on a nobody. Not when war had broken out and he could sell her off to a higher bidder. Peter wouldn't say it wasn't a relief to be spared the need to marry Lysa, and even though somewhere deep down he felt the loss of the child, he needed to be practical. Marrying her would have achieved them nothing. He would have returned to the Vale, buried in shame and scandal for having seduced his host's daughter, back to his castle falling apart in the middle of nowhere, with an expensive wife and their future children. But then Hoster had his guards hold Lysa down as he shoved a moon tea down her throat, and 2 days later Lysa was marrying Jon Arryn, cursing every last hair on her father's head. Catelyn had been lost too, making Peter's plans moot after all. The faked raven had delayed the marriage to the north, and given him revenge on Brandon Stark. It had even worked as far as leading to the Targaryen fall, something Peter could never have dreamt of. But then Lysa had been useful again, sweet-talking her husband into giving her friend Peter a position at court. Hoster Tully had been furious, but he killed any whispers on the indecent relationship between them, and to try and push Peter away now would raise suspicion. He didn't want raised. Besides, Lysa was married, so whatever happened would be just passed as a child as another man's. So, for years and years, Peter had worked his way to the top of King's Landing. He had made the right friends, risen to Master of Coin, grown his riches beyond his wildest dreams, and achieved a position that put him just in the right place to do it all over again. Because once more the gods conspired in his favour, putting all the players in favourable places. Lysa complained and complained, and when Jon Arryn had been dumb enough to accept having his son fostered at Casterly Rock, regardless of investigating Cersei's little secret, Lysa had been desperate enough to do what Peter suggested. Oh, how quickly she had accepted the plan, how remorseless she had been to poison her own lord husband. But the bait hadn't worked completely. There had been a hiccup in the second part of the plan. Catelyn had fallen from grace. Without Catelyn to manipulate her mentally challenged former husband, without her to urge Ned Stark into trusting Littlefinger, then the Starks were beyond his manipulation. It would have been so easy. Ned would have fallen for the same trap as Brandon and confronted the Lannisters. Then Cersei would have him and Robert killed. Then the North would rise and war would happen. And amidst the chaos, Littlefinger would rise. But that dream had been killed the day Catelyn was caught mistreating the bastard. Cursed boy! Peter had sent one of his spies to kill the boy in his crib when he was still a toddler, but his nurse had caught it and disposed of the poison. Another chance was lost when the boy was only a child, and then Peter gave up on it. Had he known how troublesome Jon Starling would grow up to be? Because Westeros was on the brink of war again, and people were divided between Robert and a possible restoration with Daenerys Targaryen. If he had succeeded in killing the bastard, the girl would be sent to the Sept and forgotten, instead of being a threat now. But it was useless to cry over it. He needed a new plan. Pitting Starks and Lannisters against each other was still the best call. Peter only needed to be more aggressive about it. And then a small smile spread across his face as an idea came to him. Oh, but he needed to send word to his people in Winterfell immediately. End of chapter. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed that one. Okay, so big thing about this, two big things. Ned has chosen not to tell Jon, which I think is a bit more understandable, but Adam's got a point too. And an interesting thing about Littlefinger is that he is the hero of his own story. It's the whole live long enough to see yourself become the villain. But like, he would have been the hero in any other thing. A little lordling with barely anything to his name falls in love with a girl above his station and like tries to fight for her but fails and then learns to fight a different way to try to get to her. It's fascinating to me, frankly, that these things are written in. But anyway, you guys know the drill. Like, comment and subscribe and hit that bell to get notified for whenever I upload a new video. Have a good day, night or whatever time zone you're in. Bye my guys, gals and non-binary pals. I'll see you in another video. Take care.